So good afternoon, everybody. Please excuse if you hear any loud noises around me because there's very strong rains here where I am right now. Hopefully, it will not interfere with my internet connection. But welcome to my session. Today, I'll be talking about utilizing student experiences for assessments or in assessments. So again, I'll just reintroduce myself. My name is Selene Estaris. I'm a grade school social studies teacher from Xavier School. I'm an ed tech coach for the grade school department, and I'm also an Apple Learning Leader. Okay, so one of the buzzwords that we hear pretty often nowadays when it comes to assessments is authentic. Actually, even before we transferred to online classes, there has been a lot of talk about making assessments authentic. And now that we've transferred to online classes, this has become an even bigger deal. Okay, however, what is the reason that we are targeting for our assessments to be authentic? What's the reason that we're told over and over again that our assessments, as much as possible, should be authentic to students? Okay, so before I talk about what makes assessments authentic, how we can make them authentic, and why we should make them authentic, I want to get an idea from the room first. So I'd like to get everybody's thoughts on this. What do you think makes an assessment authentic? You can go ahead and type it in the chat box, and I'll read some of them out loud as you're typing them. Okay, please make sure you send it to everybody so that everybody can also see your ideas on it. So we have real life, application to real life, having real world context, fitting into the SMART acronym. Okay. Okay, community context based occurs naturally. It's real life, performance based, relevant and contextualized, okay, makatotohanan or realistic, contextualized. All right, so I see a lot of ideas here, and a lot of them are actually converging on similar thoughts or similar definitions, at least, of how we as teachers consider assessments as authentic. So a lot of the time when we talk about authentic assessments, these are assessments that are, like you've mentioned, they are contextualized. We take into consideration the context of where our students are coming from. We also take into consideration real life factors that could affect our students or affect the way that they live. So they're also performance based. So yes, instead of us simply giving our students, the typical pen and paper test, objective type test, we kind of strive for something further. We strive for an assessment where they have to actually perform something. They can have a chance to practice the skills that they've learned or to apply the knowledge that they've learned. Okay, it occurs naturally. It's a real life application. So majority of what I'm seeing here really talks about being realistic and being contextualized. Okay, so that's a good idea of what we mean by authentic. Okay, now, why is it that assessments need to be authentic now more than ever? I know that before we even switched up to online classes, a lot of us have been hearing this buzzword a lot when it comes to assessments. And I'm sure that a lot of our, department chairpersons, our heads have been asking us to make our assessments more authentic. Okay, but why make them authentic? Okay, so first reason, especially now that we are doing mostly online classes or distance learning or remote learning for most of us, it's Google proof. Because we can't keep watch over our students the entire time they're doing this assessment. Or even if we can watch them, even if we have Zoom, if we have their videos on and we can see what they're doing, we can't necessarily monitor everything that's going on their screen. And besides, that's a breach of our privacy laws. So it's Google proof, meaning that students cannot just easily Google the answers to these assessments. They can't just type the question and find the answer quickly. They can't just, ask a Google assistant or things like that for the answers. So they won't have to rely on Googling their answers. They won't rely also either on just regurgitating or, repeating information that we've given them through our discussions or information they've seen in our presentations or in their textbooks. So we're going beyond that already. We're not letting them simply just repeat the same ideas we've already given them, but instead allow for them to create ideas of their own and express how they think these things that we've taught them can really apply to them. Another is that it goes beyond the classroom. So we're not just focusing on learning within the classroom, but instead students will realize that whatever they're learning in class is actually relevant to them in the real world, in real life situations. Because I have seen posts, I'm sure we've all at some point seen posts or heard people talk about, why did we learn this particular topic at school? Why did we learn this subject at school? I can't even really apply it to real life. Most often it comes to things like algebra, things like that. Why did we learn this topic at school? I don't even really apply it in real life. Why didn't they teach us something else that I can actually use? And by making our assessments authentic, we're showing students that what they're learning is relevant in real life. It is important for them to learn that, because in these types of situations, this is where you can apply what you've learned. So they're seeing how the knowledge and skills that they're getting from classes can actually be useful to their day-to-day lives or to maybe their future lives when they start a career in something. So that's why we want to make our assessments authentic. Okay, but how do we make our assessments authentic? So I want to focus on two things or two ways that we make our assessments authentic. And that is by making them first realistic and second relevant. So a lot of you were actually able to pinpoint these two particular ideas or these two particular ways of making assessments authentic. Realistic means that our assessments are based on real life scenarios, things that actually happen in real life. And we can draw on social issues, we can draw on current events or whatever is happening to our students. So basically, we take their context, we take where they're coming from and use it as the springboard for our assessments. And then another is that they should be relevant, meaning that the situations that we do ask our students to, focus on in their assessments are situations that they are familiar with, situations they may have been in already or know about or have experience in. Because when we make those assessments relevant to them, it engages them further. It kind of motivates them to actually do the assessment or to do the task that they need to, because they know what it's like to be in that position. They know kind of like the background of that particular real life situation, and they know that it affects them. And when something affects us, usually we care more about things that affect us directly. So if our assessments show that these skills and these knowledge affect our students directly, they're more likely to be engaged in it and motivated to actually do what they need to do. So I would just like to show a couple of examples of how we've made in our grade 4 social studies class, how we've made our assessments authentic throughout the past school year. So I'm going to show first some examples for realistic assessments. So for this one, the context that we're drawing on here is, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, a very rich source of social issues and current events. And it's something that we know students have definitely experienced, whether, that's to a certain extent or just a little bit, but we know that they have an idea of this particular situation. So in this assessment that we gave them, our topic for this one was actually government, the powers of the government, particularly taxation. So in this activity or in this assessment, we put them in the role of being in charge of the local government funds, in charge of budgeting the local government's money. And then what we want them to do is to prioritize things that will be helpful during the pandemic. So they are instructed to prioritize and to budget the money appropriately in selecting the best services and projects that could help prevent or manage the spread of COVID-19 in their local governments. So let's take a look. As you can see, I also put in a little confidential stamp, and that's just something to, give them the kind of idea that this is the role I'm in. This is, kind of give them an idea that this might be real. So it puts them in that mindset. Okay, so Obviously, the budget here is not realistic per se because we needed to work within a certain amount that students could understand. We know that, of course, the budget is a lot bigger than this, but we needed to work within, what students know as well. So we give them, let's say, this list of possible projects and services, and then the price range of each project and service. And then from this, they will have to budget the money that they have, the budget that the local government has, in selecting the different health or health and safety services and projects that they would want to prioritize or to provide to their local governments, their local communities. So these are the examples, and then they would have to fill up, of course, the form where they identify particularly what the specific projects or services are, and then of course they get the total. It doesn't end there, of course. We have some processing questions after this, asking why they chose those particular projects, if they believe that those are the best use of the local government's budget, and what other suggestions they might have to provide health and safety to the community. So that's one example of an assessment. Another that we have is a hazard mapping assessment. So for this one, this is a mapping skills assessment. Students were asked to create their own hazard map. Again, this is based on the COVID-19 pandemic, and the situation we're providing to them is that at some point we're going to have to return to school. We're going to have to return to Xavier School. But we want to know which areas are safe to pass through and which areas may not be so safe to pass through yet. So they will create a hazard map based on the information that they have on the info sheet, and then they will use a color legend to create that map there that you see there on the right. So again, a realistic situation because there truly are, these are actual numbers, although we've updated it this year, it's a lot higher now, but these are actual numbers that we used of the confirmed cases of COVID. So they're really in that situation. And then another example that we have here is an example or an activity that we used for the topic of elections in the government, voter education. For this one, as you can see, we provided them with information about each of these candidates. If you're wondering why the candidates are cartoon characters, it's because these candidates, the information about these candidates are actually the actual information of the candidates who ran in the 2016 presidential elections. And we just covered them up so that we could make sure that students focused instead on the candidates' credentials and maybe any pros and cons that they might have, as well as what they're advocating for. So we wanted students to really focus on these candidates' characteristics, what they had going for them, and what maybe red flags they had. And after that, that's when we show them after they're done voting. Okay, so in this context, as you can see as well, again, realistic. It's based on actual candidates from the 2016 elections, and it's giving the students that opportunity to learn or to know what it's like to be a voter, to be in that situation where you have to choose somebody who's going to be a leader. So that's for realistic. I'm also going to be showing some examples for relevant. So for relevant, we have this example. This is a postcard. This topic is more on the national and cultural identity. So we focus on family traditions and practices. So as you can see, our students created postcards showing those traditions that they often practice. And then at the end of it, we asked, how can you continue practicing these traditions, knowing that we have to do social distancing measures, that we can't do gatherings right now? How can you still continue those traditions despite these restrictions? And you can see some of the answers that my student gave there. They can do video calls instead, ordering food instead of going out, and then sending cards or gifts instead of, going to a gathering. So it's relevant to them because they know what it's like. They're in that situation where they want to celebrate these traditions, but they can't because there's a lot of restrictions right now. And then another would be the push and pull factors of their community for migration. So we have them do a checklist to check whether their communities have these characteristics. And then from there, they decide, does my city or municipality have more push factors or pull factors? Would I recommend people to live here or not? Okay, so again, realistic and relevant because they are living there. It is based on their own personal experiences in the communities that they're actually based in. Okay, so that's it for my presentation. I hope that I was able to impart more or less some ideas on how we can make assessments more authentic by using our students' real life experiences to boost or to use as a springboard for our assessments. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your insights. If you, excuse me, if anyone has questions, feel free to send them via chat or you may unmute yourselves. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Hi, Ma'am Selene.
Hi, Ms. Hershey.
My name is Hershey from Philippine Science High School. And I would like to thank you for that wonderful presentation and sharing of your practice there in Xavier. Am I right, Xavier? Okay. So it's really very wonderful and almost very ideal. But yeah, it's really doable. And I was just wondering what sort of rubrics would you set for that kind of assessment? Because I hate to say it, but some of those activities or assessments can be somehow subjective. There's really no clear right and wrong input from the students. But so I'm just curious, how would you score or assign points or your set of rubrics, like, if you may share. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Unfortunately, I don't have a rubrics ready right now, but I can share what we do with it. So basically, we use a 3-point scale for grading them. So instead of numbers, we have like insufficient evidence,
Oh,
pass,
okay.
and with distinction. So, of course, pass is the standard, and then with distinction means that the student went beyond what we expected.
Mm,
And then insufficient evidence would mean that it's still lacking on the skills that we're looking for. And then from that, we also identify specific skills that we're looking for, not specific answers. We're not looking for specific answers because, especially for a subject like social studies, where a lot of our
mm,
questions are very open ended, it's
yes,
difficult to look for specific answers because we want
true.
students to also practice expressing their opinions and backing it up with evidence.
Yeah.
So instead of looking for specific answers, we instead identify skills like student was able to express his opinions clearly and provided evidence from classroom discussion and from sources to support his answer. So our skills
Yes.
are structured like that. For the hazard mapping, for example, students were able to create their hazard map using the color legend and by providing
Mm,
specific information.
I really like that color map, hazard map that you have. It's really very up for their age, and it
Yes.
also like meets the objective of really making the assessment realistic and relevant. Okay, that thank you for that answer.
All
Yeah,
right. Welcome, Ms. Hershey. I hope that helped.
it helps. Yeah.
Okay. I also see some questions in the chat box. So, um, the assessments you have shared earlier are for what level? You also have sample assessment for early grades. So this assessments I shared are for grade 4 students. I don't have samples right now of the assessments we have for grade lower grades, but basically it's similar in structure. It's just that there's a lot more guidance through it. There's more prompts. So instead of having them answer or give their opinions on their own, what we do is we provide leading statements and then they just fill in the blanks. Like for example, it would say like, I think that my community is open close parenthesis a good place, a bad place to live in, and then they would just have to circle it because it has things like, and then we could have a checklist there. So it's more or less similar in structure. It's more or less similar in the way that we want them to be able to practice those skills that they have. It's just that there's a lot more guidance for lower grade levels. I hope that I was able to answer your question, Daryl. I also have okay, from Celeste Lescano. Okay, does the 3 points have equivalent percentage, how it contributes to the final grade of the student? So yes, the 3 points have their percentages. However, it's more on based on our assessment. So basically, like each assessment has a certain percentage to it. And then the 3 points is, if you think about it, I don't know if you use letter grades, but for us, we used to use letter grades in when we had face-to-face classes. So you could think of the 3 points as like the A plus, A/B, and then B/F. It's kind of like that. And of course, they have their own weights to them. I also have a couple more questions. Oh, Dr. Porio said he combined Hazard Hunter with Google Maps and OpenStreetMap. So that's also a great way of being able to teach students about hazards and doing the hazard assessment. You can use Google Maps. We use Google Maps a lot also in our subject when we want students to look at the topography of a place and identify what could be possible hazards based on that. They actually start doing that at grade 3. They use the Google Maps to be able to pinpoint those topographical features and any advantages or disadvantages that they may bring. We also used before, what's this? It was a resource from Feebox. I forgot what the name is called, but I think it revolved around identifying whether your community is safe from any hazards or if there are hazards that it could potentially be prone to, like earthquakes, landslides, things like that. Okay, from Iron Boqueron, question about the election-related authentic assessment you showed. Although it is necessary to form our students' political sense as well, how can you prevent our students' parents from thinking that we teachers are promoting our own political views when we are just discussing facts? I had an experience last school year wherein a parent sent me an email saying that she believes another teacher of her son is politically biased when the teacher speaks about current events. Thank you. Okay, so this is a hot topic for social studies teachers in particular because we get this question a lot. And we ask ourselves this question a lot too. How can we make sure that we don't come off as if we are pushing any political agenda or something like that? And the answer is that we always present both sides of something. As you saw in the candidates earlier, the list of candidates, it was not just their achievements, it was not just their red flags, but it was both. So it was the good and the bad, and all it was presented for all candidates. So there's a balance there. When we present on other things as well, like current events, we, as much as possible, present both sides of it. And when we ask our students about their opinions on it, we have to keep an open mind. We don't dismiss a student's opinion because, it's against what we believe. Because I know as much as we want to be impartial, we have also, of course, we're only human. We have our own beliefs. And when we listen to students, we have to keep an open mind and we have to teach them. But that anytime you're stating your opinion, there's no right or wrong. The important thing is that you are backing it up with information that's credible and sources that you can actually provide to prove your point. That's the important thing. You can't just state an opinion and have nothing to really back it up, because then it's just, a personal opinion and it has really no weight. But if you want to make it more credible, you have to provide that information. And oftentimes for us, the information comes from news articles that we give to them, or even news articles that they come across on their own, or sources that they come across on their own. So that's what we usually teach them, and that's how we usually deal with those types of situations. I hope that was helpful, Iron. I'm not seeing any further questions in the chat box or any other clarifications. Thank you also so much for everybody in the chat box who shared some of the resources that they use as well, and some of the practices that they do to create your own authentic assessments.
Okay, Mom Celine.
Yes,
Hershey again.
yes,
Yeah.
Ms. Hershey.
So do you get to evaluate this kind of assessment by the students? Do you get to ask for feedback? How do they find these kinds of assessments? And so far, what's their feedback?
Mhm. So yes, because after each assessment, we usually do a processing and then we ask students how they found the assessment, if it was difficult, if there were certain things that they struggled with, or just the general uh, feedback of how they found it. And most of them really enjoy that. They don't necessarily, even their parents mentioned this, that it's great that even if they don't have to memorize anything, they'll be able to actually perform or do their assessment, because really it's not about memorizing anything. It's more about applying the skills or applying what they learn. And they appreciate that, most of them appreciate that they're able to do that they don't have to memorize anything just to get a good grade in the subject.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, good to know. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, welcome.